Hello, I'm Dapper Dan Gavosdin, and I own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, including the annuals, which definitely count.
And I'm mischievous Mark Ginocchio, and I too own every issue of Amazing Spider-Man, as well as the Amazing Scarlet Spider. But
Oh,
the annuals, they don't count. But Scarlet Spider, I think, does, okay? Because it is an amazing book.
the most hastily aborted series of all time.
I got all two issues of it, Dan, so we're counting it.
All right, there you go. So that's more of like a footnote to our collection than anything else. I also own those two issues. Well, welcome everybody to the Amazing Spider Talk, the show where two fans and collectors uncover the strange, fun, and fascinating history of the Spider-Man comic universe. And thanks everybody for joining us for another one of our fabulous review episodes of the all-new Amazing Spider Talk. They just keep putting these books out so fast, we can't hardly keep up with them.
It's true, Dan. Well, today on this show, for the third week in a row, we're going to be discussing a brand new issue of Amazing Spider-Man. This one will be Volume 5, number 57, Legacy number 858. It is written by Nick Spencer with pencils by Mark Bagley, inks by Andrew Hennessy, John Dell, and Andy Owens, colors by Edgar Delgado and Rachelle Rosenberg, and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. Also, the cover is by Mark Bagley, John Dell, and Morry Hollowell. This issue was first released on January 13th, 2021. Dan, as I said, this is the third week in a row. We got a brand new issue. They're pumping them out. This story must just be going really far-flung places, right? So let's get right into it.
Well, I mean, that's a good way of saying that it's not going far-flung places. And I think the way we can kind of tell straight away here is that, this doesn't even start, with the end of the previous issue. We are thrown back in time again, back to the start of, I guess the moments right after the events of Last Remains, the event known as Last Remains, where Kindred is trapped in the Spot Cube and is being hauled out of the graveyard, the unmarked graveyard. And Peter is kind of picking up the pieces of his life post that moment, which we'd already gotten past in the previous issue. So now we're kind of playing catch up from Peter's point of view through all of this. And I mean, I'm just going to say this. This issue feels really like a retread, even if it is from Peter's perspective. But I don't feel like Peter's perspective was really needed. I don't feel like we really get that much new out of Peter's perspective other than him being mum about it. And, I guess we get caught up pretty quickly. But, I feel like we spend, at least a quarter of this book on things that don't really take the story forward.
Yeah, that's a great observation, Dan. I mean, it's kind of funny. Last week when we were doing the show, I had mentioned, hey, not a lot of Peter in this book. Kind of weird to have this Fallout issue that doesn't focus on Peter. That didn't mean that we necessarily had to kind of retread everything that Peter experienced, especially when I feel like it added so little to the story. I mean, I don't know. We got a lot of Peter and Norman Osborn again in this story, but you know what? We got Peter and Norman Osborn a few issues ago, and I felt frankly that was more interesting and compelling stuff, especially with Norman at that point still being, I guess, kind of not under the Sin Eater's, well, it's not spell, but whatever, being
Yeah.
shotgun blast or whatever you want to call it. I mean, watching Norman, kind of watching them redo this dynamic essentially, except this time Norman is kind of a sniveling coward. Because I hate to be cynical, Dan, but this status quo is not permanent, no matter what they say right now. So it's watching the dynamic under this guy's, it's going to be all rendered moot at some point anyway. So why are we lingering here with Norman all of a sudden being apologetic and kind of, remorseful about all the torment that he's put Peter and Harry through? And like you said, what does this truly add to this story at this point? I mean, we are I mean, we are well past spinning our wheels. Like we have been we were spinning our wheels 10 books ago. I don't even know what this is at this point. This is like it's almost comical in terms of where we're at in terms of storytelling and structure now. So, what do you want to start breaking down some segments here? I mean, like
Well,
this.
I want to push back a little bit. Like
Okay.
I don't mind the whole like will Norman forever be cured of the Green Goblin? The chances of that are very slim, right? I mean, like if you can kill Norman off however many decades ago and him come back after 30 years or whatever, he's going to come back, repeatedly over and over again. Um, I don't mind that because that's the cyclical nature of comics. So like if that's the story we're going to tell, then fine, let's tell it. And I do appreciate that the story at least kind of acknowledges it, right? If we're going to start breaking this down, the kind of the meat of this thing is Peter kind of telling Norman off and saying like, I'm done with the goblins. I'm done messing with you guys. I've extended all of my sympathies to you, but I have like good people in my life that I've got to protect. And at a certain point, like I'm not actually doing the service of protecting people. I'm just caught up in this weird blood feud that's gone on for far too long. Whether I do have some challenges accepting that character from Peter. And I don't love the timing of this story, considering I felt like we got a pretty conclusive Goblin story at the end of Dan Slott's run. But the Norman being cured is the least of my problems because I actually think it's fairly interesting and an angle that we've never really seen. This character grappling with the guilt of the actions of the Goblin. Like, that's interesting to me. It makes him into a sort of Spider-Man character on his own, right? A guy who has made a bunch of mistakes and is now trying to live up for them. That's interesting to me. Maybe you make a parallel between Harry and Uncle Ben, right? If you could save your family member, would you? And now I'm probably going way too far down the rabbit hole of the themes presented here and putting stuff there that isn't there. But that's not a problem for me necessarily. It's just that, like, I felt like there were no revelations in this conversation that suggested a change in the status quo for either of these characters that I'm eager to follow up on. Because they basically just say, like, time out for now.
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of where I'm at with it, Dan, and maybe that's why. I mean, like, regardless of kind of our differing perspectives on the legitimacy of it, I mean, like the way I'm kind of seeing it is, you know, I don't feel that this is like the real Norman, for lack of a better phrase. I think this is some kind of like inorganic, projection of Norman here. And, like if he was saying this kind of stuff and it was landing with any kind of efficiency that, where like we could actually have some actual growth in the relationship of these characters, maybe that would be interesting to me. But it's not. I mean, like Peter is just kind of like, and you could just say, well, because Peter is dealing with his own issues right now, and that's fair. I mean, we are a couple of comics removed from a story where he was getting killed repeatedly, so he might be a little annoyed. But
Right.
like the fact is, it's like I don't feel like having this dynamic as is not interesting because they're not doing anything interesting with it, to be frank. I mean, I just feel like whatever we got in this issue, regardless of where they could go with it or what the potential is, they haven't done it yet. They haven't done it in 50, what are we on, 57 now, 56, whatever issues. They have not been doing interesting things with these characters, and I'm done being duped by it. So start doing interesting stuff, and I'll change my tune. But like this to me was just it was just wasted space because it's gonna be either nullified or they're not doing anything to make me want to not see it be nullified. So what's the point? I hate to be so nihilistic about it, Dan, but like I don't quite get what I was reading here for 28 pages this issue. Like it just felt like just so much backpedaling and repetition and nothing just interesting. I don't care. I just don't care.
Did I hear you correctly in suggesting that you don't think that this is Norman? Because that's not a question that really ever occurred to me.
Oh, I shouldn't say that I don't think this is Norman. Like, it's Norman Osborn, but like this is we have had this version of this character for 50 whatever years, 56, 57 years at this point. And we are suddenly doing this very sharp change based on basically a MacGuffin being
Right.
enacted, and like to me, it's like this is not like an organic change in the character. I mean, this is magic basically. It's a wave of a wand that has created this character now. So to me, it's almost I shouldn't say it's not the real Norman, but it's not, like if I want to see if they're going to change the dynamic of these characters, I want to see it happen in some kind of organic, interesting way. And waving a wand to me is not interesting. I think like it's basically playing make believe with these characters to what end, I'm not sure. To serve story over character, I guess. So I mean, like, could we be possibly suggesting that very down deep, Norman has some kind of guilt and remorse for what he has done to Harry and to Peter and to everything? I guess you could say that because that's the powers of the magic gun that fired at him. But the thing is, like, there's nothing in this story that has naturally led Norman to come to these conclusions. I mean, he has literally been the biggest SOB in the world to these characters for 5.5 decades. So like, it just, to me, like it just feels unearned and uninteresting because I don't see how this is a natural path for these characters. It's like I said, it's magic. I'm not here for magic. Like, let's like these are some of the best characters that this medium has to offer us. Like, let's do real things with them. Let's not do magic with them.
All right, so I'm gonna put you on the record here, Mark.
Okay.
Secret Scrolls from Spider Verse versus Magic Gun from Sins Rising. Rank them in terms of your how much you despise them.
I mean, I probably still rank Secret Scrolls higher in terms of the disdain list, just because, like, I mean, seriously, what are we doing in a Spider-Man book with scrolls? I mean, like, I at least feel like a magic gun is a little more plausible. I mean, like, we are working in a universe that has things like the Cosmic Cube and the Infinity Gauntlet. So, like, I mean, it feels a little more grounded. Whereas scrolls, I feel like, we're reaching into a mythology that usually is not, aligned with the universe here. So I will say that. So we'll put scrolls, but this gun is very close behind.
And I agree with you. I think the gun is cheap. The only reason I'm more willing to accept it, and for me, I think Secret Scrolls outranks the gun in my disdain, is because the decision to throw Norman out of the craft and be shot by the gun was ultimately a decision that a character made. And so it has some like weight behind it in terms of characterization. I don't think you were ever going to get a scene where Norman suddenly opened up his heart after years of therapy and was like, I should have make amends for
Right.
all of this. So if you want to explore a character like that, I mean, why not a magic gun? I mean, it just sounds really inelegant when I say magic gun because it is maybe the least elegant way you could probably have handled it, but at least the person who put him in front of the gun did so actively and in a way that I think will have repercussions and already seems to have had some, although minor, repercussions, which gets back to the heart of some of our critiques of this story. And that's to say, like, I think I'm a little more on board with exploring this than you, even if I do think how we got here is not the cleanest way, that we could. I do want to see it progress more actively. But in this issue, I was ready to have Spider-Man and Norman face each other for the first time in this new status quo, and there was some interesting things done with it, like kind of exploring Spider-Man, his PTSD, and how he didn't let Norman off the hook even in the face of this. I think is interesting, but I don't know where this relationship is going. There's no tease for what's next for these guys. And I'd rather see them have to actively play off each other than kind of like, I'll see you never, which is not going to be the case.
Right, right. I mean, like, I agree with you in terms of like it. I mean, the interesting wrinkle is that, like Peter created this monster or non-monster, however you want to see it. So like it is interesting to watch him kind of once again have to deal with the consequences of his actions. But the fact of the matter is, as you said, like he really doesn't, though. It's kind of like, this story kind of ends on a note of, yeah, see you never, and it's like, well, are they actually going to team up here? And, like, I'm presuming yes, but the fact of the matter is, like, the glacial rate that this story is being told, who knows when that's going to happen now? You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, so it's just kind of like continuing the frustration on that level, which is like, okay, well, maybe there is something potentially interesting here, but we're not pulling the trigger on it now, nor is there any indication that we're going to be pulling the trigger on it. It's just kind of like everything else that's been going on with Harry and Kindred, which is like, these very not even subtle allusions to things like Brand New Day, or excuse me, One More Day and Brand New Day. But like, we're still not going to tell you what exactly is going on. We're just going to make you assume and guess. And I feel like that's what's happening here. It's, yeah, I mean, I'm assuming at some point everyone is going to have to come to terms with what's happened to everybody, but this story does not advance that point in the least. It's just kind of, it's a rehash of Peter telling off Norman, which, we have been seeing, we saw it aplenty in like the Paul Jenkins run. We saw it in Dan Slott's run. We have seen this. We have seen these conversations, except the difference this time is Norman is not ready to murder Spider-Man in return. So that's where we're at, and that's fine. But like I said, I'm just, and maybe this is just my pent up frustration with everything else that's been going on with this comic, but you got to give me more than this. I think that's just where we're at now. You got to give me more than this. I'm not going to let myself go down the rabbit hole of, well, it could be this, it could be that, when there's just been no indication that the creators are going down the rabbit hole.
Well, I want to get to a point that you said about like all these things coming back to the Goblin. We've seen this story over and over again, and I think it comes to like a critique maybe we've lobbied at Spencer a few times, which is there's so much that in these books that exists on like a metatextual level that without progressing the actual text. Like in the opening of this book, when Peter comes out of the tomb and has like a tearful reunion with MJ, which I think is a repeat from the previous issue where he found out she wasn't dead and they exchanged a kiss. That was far more impactful than this one was, although Mark Bagley draws a great tearful Peter Parker. But then when the Order confronts him, Gwen is like, well, you got to give us something. And he won't. And that's like how we're all feeling. And if that's like a meta scream, it's like, cool, we're on the same page as your characters, but like we're on the same page in that we're all frustrated. And it's not a feeling that I want to have, currently. But then, this is to your point, is that like, Peter kind of blows up on Norman, saying that like, no matter the status of Norman, he's always interrupting his life. And we even get like a Mason Banks shout out, which I appreciated in its own unique way. Got to keep that Mason Banks flame alive, Mark.
I mean, the best Goblin mystery yet, I would say.
But that just gets to the point that like this book can't quit the Goblin. And, if this is Peter saying like this book needs to move past the Goblin in some metatextual way, or Nick Spencer saying like, I'm going to put this to rest in one final story, it's like, it would be great if I believed it. But like I felt in issue 800, we had a real, apex for the Osborns. Yes, Norman thought he was Cletus Cassidy and was doing his own weird thing in Absolute Carnage. But I just don't know that we like to bring Kindred into this and make it all centered around the Osborns. If we are to believe that, which I think at this point we should, I think it just kind of further underlines that like I'm just kind of sick of the Osborns dominating all the major stories in this book for so long. Even Superior, which finally felt like a break. The big ending was a Goblin thing, and I'm just exhausted by this. And it seems like Spencer might be commenting on that. And if Spencer wants to play the role, as we've suggested, of Mr. Cleanup on the Spider-Man titles, of like kind of fixing like long simmering things, and this is his way of ushering the Osborns off the stage, great, but it doesn't make it like fun to read in the moment because I'm just kind of tired of the Goblin stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, I agree with that, but and I agree with everything you said. I mean, but like frankly, it's like there was nothing to clean up in this instance. I mean, I feel like where Norman was left and where Harry was left at 800, like those two characters could have been frozen in time there for as long as Spencer wanted. Like he could have written an entire run of comics without ever referencing the Osborns again. I don't think there was any like gaping hole there that would have indicated like, oh, we got to tie that loose end up. You know what I mean? This wasn't like a Black Cat situation where it was like, well, she's still out there ready to like murder Spider-Man
Right.
inexplicably. So it is kind of odd to me that if that's what he's trying to achieve here, that this is how he's going about doing it. It's kind of like, like this chair needs fixing. Why? I'm sitting in it and it's fine. And then like Nick Spencer saws off the legs. He's like, no, it needs fixing. It's like, oh yeah, you're right. You better fix the chair now because you saw the legs off. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else he could have done it. Because like now we're in a place with Harry, and again, we still don't quite know what is going on here. I mean, I feel like every time I put something on social media about Kindred and Harry Osborn, the initial response from somebody is it even truly Harry? And like, yeah, the assumption is that there's something still going on here. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the text, it's Harry right now. It's Harry Osborn. There's no reason to not believe that. This is what we have been told, and until we get told otherwise, this is where we're at. So now it's like, we're if we need to fix this dysfunction of the Osborns and how they've kind of consumed this book, it's like, well, now you had a character that was truly like in a good place, and put him back in a place he hasn't been in almost 30 years, essentially. So like how now you got more work in front of you. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, I mean, that could be what Spencer is trying to achieve here, but like there is nothing in the text that we've been given so far that indicates that this isn't anything more than Spencer wanting to tell his Osborn story. Like I feel like he's wanted to tell his Craven story. He's wanted to tell his Lizard story. He's wanted to tell scratch some itches. So like, and now he's telling his Osborn story. But maybe I'll be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily his fault. I mean, like if
Right.
you're given the pages of Amazing Spider-Man, you're gonna want to do your Goblin story, And I think maybe
Right.
that's the problem, is that like, and again, it gets back to kind of like editorial, which is like, I mean, if this is truly the thing that is like, that was pitched to editorial as hanging the Nick Spencer run on, they're not going to tell him don't touch it. Like that's the story they want to go ahead with. I would say maybe it wasn't the right time to go ahead with that story. sometimes, and you can follow Dan Slott on Twitter, and he'll tell you about all the Spider-Man stories he wanted to tell, but he never really could. And you think, well, how could he have more Spider-Man stories he didn't get to tell? The guy was on the book for 10 years. Well, some things don't work out, and sometimes the editors tell you we're putting this character on ice for a while, and so on and so forth. And for me, I do find there's something very odd about reading issue 800, where Harry Osborn is like a self-proclaimed man, and then reading issue 802 ostensibly, and he's suddenly a demon with years of history of being a demon. Will that be cleaned up? I imagine it will. But it does suggest not wanting to kind of let those pieces lie still for a moment. And I would put that like more on editorial than any writer, because if you gave me Amazing Spider-Man, I would want to do something completely different with it. But the average writer is going to go, I'll do something different within limits and get to tell my story of the Sinister Six or yada yada,
Yeah. Let's talk about a few other things in this issue, because we could probably be yammering about this forever. Let's talk a little bit about the order, which has an official name now. It is the Order.
Yeah, because nobody could remember if it was the Order of the Web or the Order of the Spider.
Right.
We'll just keep
let's
it
just
simple.
make it the Order.
Yeah.
So what's going on with Julia Carpenter here? Because like I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, but I feel like, what was it, 1 or 2 issues ago, she got blasted by the Sin Eater, and I thought she lost her powers, but she seemed to be doing her usual shtick here.
I mean, the no prize is everybody got their powers back except for Norman. But like, that means that like it was an instant kill. Like she was like, take my powers. And then he got her powers, killed himself, and she got her powers right back. Which, like, fine, I guess that technically works, but also is kind of stupid in terms of, like, lasting consequences for actions that people take. But I guess she did, like, some 3-dimensional chess or 4-dimensional chess in her case, and, that was the answer,
Yeah, I mean, so in other words, our premonition that maybe... Julia, that Madam Web was maybe going to be put on ice for a while was grossly exaggerated.
Not even an issue. She made it.
Yeah. I did kind of appreciate Spider-Gwen basically being the voice of everyone in this book. Basically, like, you got to give us something to Peter at one point when he's kind of coming out of his stupor with MJ, and I know you alluded to the scene earlier, but like I don't know if you mentioned the quote exactly. I mean, like, I don't know, like I legitimately guffawed at that line when I read it, because it just felt like, I don't know, man, like I gotta think that Nick Spencer is, when he puts these comics out, regardless of some of the criticism that he might be getting from people, his attitude is like, no, I'm telling the best story I can. But then when he puts a line in like that, I mean, it's like, I'm almost kind of like, blink twice if you need help, Nick. I mean, like, if there's a problem right now and you're being asked to pad this thing out, you don't have to put it in the text like that if that's how you're gonna do it. I mean, like, it really made me laugh in a metatextual way, like so much of this book. It's so meta.
Agreed. So we move on from that scene to the stuff with Norman that we talked about before. So a couple things I wanted to point out, like, what's going on with Mark Bagley's Norman? Did he forget what Norman Osborn looks like in the 616? I mean, this looks like ultimate Norman Osborn, like just flat out, maybe a bit thinner and more of a wimp, which also I think is kind of weird for Norman. Yeah, I don't know. It just really bothered me the whole time. I was like, this is just like stock evil dude, which is basically what he is in Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bummer. I mean, I definitely agreed with that. It definitely had a very ultimate look to it. But like similar to last issue, I feel like, there's just so much yammering and talking in this book and the last book, and like we're not. Poor Mark Bagley. I mean, like, we're a couple issues removed from Gleason just drawing the hell out of the book, and I mean, Bagley's a great artist, and like, let's give him some fun stuff to do. These last two issues have just not been fun, and like, they're not visually fun. It's just kind of, I mean, like, I guess Peter pounding on Norman is a little interesting, but like, I don't know, like, it just to me, like, this was pretty bland stuff, and thus Bagley, I think, was kind of, you know, he didn't have much to work with here.
I think he did like the best that he could in terms of like layouts with this scene. I mean, there is some some interesting things like here. You alluded to it, the Peter beating up Norman with this kind of like PTSD flashback as he gets very aggressive on Norman. And that was interesting. What did you think of Peter's characterization here? I mean, do you buy that he would be this aggressive and this dismissive of the Osborns? I mean, what wouldn't anybody at this point? But like, there is a sort of like Peter puts up with it because he's a comic character and his thing is unending responsibility. I mean, I guess the question is like, what is this truly different than the other times? Would this be the thing that broke Peter? Or are we just going to go with it this time?
I mean, we've had this happen very, very rarely, kind of like that moment of Peter breaking, and it's usually temporary. But like, I mean, frankly, I always think back to the death of Gene DeWolf in the first Sin Eater story, and kind of like his fight with Daredevil at the end, and his fight with Stan Carter, where he basically almost beats him to death. And one of my criticisms is always like, oh, well, would Peter be pushed to the edge like that? And I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, if there was ever a situation where he'd be pushed to the edge, I do kind of buy this would be it, based on both the characters that are involved and frankly what happened to Peter the last few issues, between his own death and resurrection over and over, and then thinking that MJ got killed off. So I buy it. I mean, it's a little rough to read, if that makes sense. Like, like you still want to see your hero be heroic, and he's anything but here. But like, I also don't blame him per se based on what we know and what's going on here.
What's interesting to me, as we always keep coming back to this kind of triggered response from Peter, like when he threw Norman out of the ship, is that it's always triggered by invoking Mary Jane's name in all of this, and he's very protective of MJ, and even Kindred highlighted that, and so much of Kindred has been around him kind of toying with MJ in some way, like being in her apartment at the conclusion of Hunted and suggesting he won't hurt her. But, it seems like we're headed somewhere with that, whether it's harming MJ, like we were teased before, which is why, like, the suggestion of MJ dying wasn't one that upset me, because it was like, okay, we're headed somewhere with this. So, like, let's just get there. If this is all about killing off MJ, let's do it. Let's explore that, because I can hang with that. Like, a lot of people are going to listen to this and be like, ugh, Gavasdan, we'll never trust you again. I love MJ. But it's like, MJ will always come back, like that's a key character. If that's a story you want to do and it's going to make the book more interesting, in the same way that Jerry Conway knew that killing Gwen would make the book more interesting, let's do it. Is it the best way to make the book more interesting? No. But, let's go there. If that's where we're going, let's go there. But, here, again, like mentioning and threatening MJ in some way, does trigger Peter. And you got the counterbalance to that, which is like MJ becoming very okay with Peter as Spider-Man, and issue 25 where she defended herself against Electro. I wonder if we're headed to kind of flipping the events of like one moment in time, where it was like, Peter now, Peter can't handle being in a relationship with MJ, whereas MJ's totally cool with it, versus instead of like, the other way around, which was MJ who couldn't handle his superheroic. So In my mind, it seems to me maybe that's the direction we're heading, is flipping that equation a little bit.
Okay, that's interesting. I dig that.
Yeah.
Um, do we want to talk about the final twist of this story a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, like, Peter beats up a Norman and is kind of shocked at his own violence and runs away. And Harry gets the final word saying, like, ha ha ha, this is all going according to my plan. You know, the
Right,
standard villain speech, which is just like, it's just tired at
right.
this point. Like, okay, Kindred, like, you're a three-dimensional chess player. And I only say it's tired because I can't follow it. You know, like I don't have any clue as to figure out what's going on. And so it's just like, well, I'm going to just have to wait and see what he's got cooked up. And that's just less fun than even beginning to guess where it's going, which at this point, I know I put a lot of guesses out there, but I'm not want to guess further. Although we're going to do it now because Carly Cooper is at the morgue and she's identifying all of the bodies that Kindred assembled from a variety of different graveyards. So at least now we know they weren't all buried in the same place in exposition dump graveyard or whatever you want to call it. Is there an exposition boulevard in New York? Because there is in LA.
Oh
So
man, I love it. I love it. Too much exposition. Cemetery. Our holy name of too much exposition.
yeah. So yes, Saint. Yeah, who's the saint of exposition? Who's Catholic? We need to call someone quick. But you know, she's looking at the bodies and she lifts up one of the sheets and discovers there's an extra body, and she recognizes it and decides to call MJ and tell her that something very odd is going down. There's an extra body, and it is ... until she's attacked by Kindred centipedes, which begs the question, wait, isn't Kindred locked up? Like, what's he doing here? How far do his powers extend?
Did he escape the Kingpin? I mean, I thought Kingpin was ready to, have his time with Kindred too, or am I confusing the timeline?
Yeah, I don't really know. And Spider-Man also suggested if Kindred got out, he would blame it on Norman. So I suspect Kindred has not escaped. So whatever. Somehow he attacks Carly Cooper, who we can, I think, take off of our roster of who is Kindred if
Right.
if we're still trying to decide that. It did
Right.
make
There's a
me
twist to
think.
that.
It did make me think, Mark, and hear me out on this. There's more than one Kindred.
Yeah, I mean, now what is this like the Scream franchise? Weren't there like multiple Ghostface or something? So I mean,
Yeah.
could we have different people in Kindred cloaks and masks? I guess it's possible.
I mean,
I mean,
Kindred suggests a multiplicity. Are there multiple Kindreds? And Harry Osborn was just one of them. That is an interesting theory to begin to chew on if you want to. I don't know what that means. Are there multiple people that feel like they have been wronged in some way by Peter? Are there multiple people whose lives were caught up in one more day? I don't know. But Carly does not get to blurt it out. But there's a couple things to go off of here. First, the look of the skeleton. And the second thing is that, like, she immediately calls MJ. So let's unpack those. Like, upon those clues or whatever, like, what did you think of this moment? What did you think of it as a storytelling, bit of storytelling? And also, what did you think of it as, like, what could this mystery be?
I mean, honestly, and this is probably not going to shock anyone listening tonight in terms of the kind of mood I'm in, but like from a storytelling standpoint, I kind of rolled my eyes at it. I was just like, yay, another mystery. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of the mindset where, like, can we resolve one mystery before we start going down the rabbit hole of another? And I'm gonna assume, because that's all we got right now, are assumptions, that one mystery is part and parcel with the other and it's all related, and I get that. But like, I don't know, like, to me just felt like another layer of like, oh, let's play guessing games, and I'm so burned out on the guessing games when it comes to this arc. that it just didn't really excite me in any kind of meaningful way. I mean, like in terms of who, like, so I might have, because I read this in the print version, so I can't blame it on reading it on my phone. But like, I didn't really get a sense that there were visual cues of who the skeleton was. So you're telling me there were visual? I hate to do this on the air, but did you have visual cues that you got from something?
I mean, that might be a bit of a stretch. I mean, looking at the skeleton, there is hair, like gray hair associated with it, that like seems like it's long. Like upon first blush, I looked at it and thought that looks kind of like Aunt May. I mean, as much as a skeleton can look like Aunt May, which is actually fairly a bit because Aunt May has looked like a skeleton from here, here and there. If you go back to the Ditko era, a misshapen skeleton, I might add, but a skeleton nevertheless. And it also kind of made me think, well, like who has been noticeably absent from this story in terms of like a name drop, and I thought about like Captain Stacy, but I don't know what that would have anything to do with MJ. So, that's not really on my list. I'll
Plus,
say this.
We saw his skeleton in the first issue, didn't we? So,
Oh,
like, if
you're
this
right.
was like
We did. I'm losing it. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I honestly like without having any kind of visual clue to go by, because I just missed it when I read the comic because I'm dumb like that. I had two thoughts. I was like, she's either calling MJ because it's MJ, and then it's like, what the F? Or the other thing that made me think was, is it Harry? Was it like, is Harry's skeleton there? Because like, we've been saying this whole time, like, can this truly be like the Harry Lyman from from issue 800, like that we're dealing with, or is this some kind of like demon version of him that was resuscitated in one more day? I don't, you know what I mean, like that he got sent back to hell and died after Peter and MJ got together because of the deal in one more day. I don't know. So that's why I was like, oh, could it possibly be Harry? So those are my guesses, not based on visual clues. I mean, if it's Aunt May, which from what you described sounds like it could be, I don't know what that does to the story. Like, what does bringing Aunt May's corpse into it have to do with anything?
Well, my suggestion for that would be if we are truly doing a one more day thing and things from one more day are being unwound, the reappearance of an Aunt May corpse could suggest that there is like some kind of convergence going on between whatever realities that we're existing in. If it ends up being Aunt May, that would be the thing that I would consider. Or maybe it's the actress that played Aunt May in issue 400. It's her corpse.
There you go. I mean, that would be a callback and a half for sure. I mean, but no, I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, that would make sense that if things were becoming undone. I mean, if this is kind of like the family photo of Michael J. Fox and Back to the Future, and people are disappearing and reappearing or whatever. I guess that would make sense here. But like I said, I am kind of so burned out on the guesses when it comes to this. Like, I just really, I'm Gwen. Like, just you got to give us something now. Like, like. So yeah, I like, hey, we got another mystery. It could be this. Your guess sounds good. I also thought that your guess about Kindred sounded good. I thought mine was too obvious, and so far it seems like mine is the right one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So like, whatever. Let's see what happens next, Dan.
I just feel like if it's MJ, I don't know that like Carly would have phrased it the way that she did. If she's like, and it's you, like
Right.
I feel like it would have been phrased differently. I think the Harry thing is like seems like the most accurate thing, but like that's kind of a lame reveal. Like, I guess it wouldn't be that lame because it would start to piece together like how this happened, like how we find ourselves in this situation, and maybe figuring out who Harry Lyman is. and maybe that's related to One More Day in some way, which they seem like they want to keep referencing that. So like, I don't know why it wouldn't be unless this was all a big tease. And then the other thing I thought, like, okay, if she's calling MJ, maybe it's Peter's body, because that's truly what like Carly and MJ, their relationship is based upon.
Right.
Except like, because we saw Peter die a bunch of times, and who knows, maybe there's some ramifications of that. But I don't know. It would seem kind of like weirdly immediate to like start throwing in like there's a dead Peter body here. So like I think like between all these, like to me at least, Harry and Aunt May seem like the most likely culprits, for this mystery. I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Probably dead wrong.
All right. Well, hey, you're not the only one who's dead in this story for sure.
same,
Um,
same with the momentum of this story. We have one final scene where Peter shows back up in his bedroom where MJ is lying in bed, and she asks if it's all over, and he says, "No, it isn't," which is kind
it
of
must continue.
yeah, that is all of our feelings. We are all Peter mournfully sitting at the end of his bed, wishing for this to be over. Um, I did want to say the framing of like Peter's face there does remind me of like the opening of Spectacular 189 with him sitting there on the couch looking at the gotcha box. It's probably not meant to, but like just the kind of framing of it from the wide to the close up on Peter's face looking straight on really reminded me of that, for whatever that's worth. So that's the end of the issue. Yeah, okay, fine. I think this is the end of the fallout of Last Remains. I'm not entirely sure. We're getting, it looks like a Mr. Negative issue next, and the solicit suggests that, like, this is truly the end of the first part of Nick Spencer's story. So maybe we'll find out who that skeleton is next issue, and that will be the big end of the chapter. But I'm not holding my breath because I've learned not to do that for sake of my own brain cells. So there you go. Mark, are we want to do some grades?
I mean, sure. Do you want me to go first,
Yeah,
and
why don't you
so I
go
could
first?
so I could lower the curve here and bring a bottom to this.
Sure.
I'm gonna give this a D plus. I was thoroughly unimpressed with it. I only give it as much as that for I feel like you said Bagley did as best as he could with it, with the art, even though some of the art still was a little clunky just because of I think it's ultimateness. Yeah, is that a word? I don't know. And hey, we got a twist, so I guess that brings some level of intrigue. But I mean, Dan, this is as we're now getting like we're moving out of the, well, it's still good but it's frustrating, to this is just all kind of bad to me now. But that might just be me. Where are you at with it?
I like when writing my notes up for tonight's show, after having read this on Wednesday, I had like forgotten what had happened in this comic. And I was like, I need to reread this because like I have to search my memory for what, and it came back to me. But like when something is forgotten that quickly, that maybe there was a better way to use those pages. And again, this is like all Spencer stuff. Well written characters, good dialogue, nice scene construction, but like without meat. Like just keep going. Why are we stringing this along? So at this point for me, it's a C minus, and I'm heading into your territory if we continue to decide to not end stories or give the audience anything to work with.
Yeah.
So it's a real shame because, like I said, hope springs anew all the time because I know it's in Spencer to do this right, but for some reason we're just not getting there.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there is. It's not like I'm reading this book saying, "Who the hell are these people? What am I reading here?" It's not like that. But like, I mean, at this point, like, spinning your story to these levels, it's like, I mean, it's just not. it's not good, like you can't tell a story this decompressed. I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like Brian Michael Bendis would read this right now and be like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" I mean, this is just taking it to a new level of decompression, and like, I think it's a terrible trend. Like, you got to do better than this, especially when there is there are signs of goodness there, and of like competence, and of just insightfulness and intelligence in terms of how these characters are being written, and the relationships, and the art is generally strong. So like, why is this not clicking? And it's not clicking because there has been this active choice, whether it be from editorial or Spencer or everyone, to basically decompress this story to hell, and bring and drag this thing out for as many chapters as possible. I mean, like, I don't know if this story has a peer outside of the Clone Saga in terms of drawing something out. And like, we still talk about that years later in terms of how not to tell a story. And I'm concerned that we're going to be doing that with this years from now, because you just don't tell stories like this. It's just bad. It's bad storytelling. So,
and I have no
anyway.
doubt that this story is written specifically for us. I mean, like, maybe not like you and I, but like, we are the audience for this story, right? Like, it is hardcore Spider-Man nerd stuff. But also, hardcore Spider-Man nerds are used to like the character bouncing. He's the everyman because he's got his finger in everything. And
Yep.
it's also just really dour stuff. Like, I don't pick this up and like find joy in it. It's like upsetting reading characters like this. And man, I mean, like, I think earlier in his run with some of the Boomerang stuff was like kind of funny and enjoyable. And I feel like we've spent a year now in just like dark territory. And yeah.
It's funny, um, and this will be my last thing before we go into our outro here, Dan. But like, it's I think early on, and he might have, when we interviewed him, had mentioned this, that one of his influences, and this is J.M. DeMatteis, and this feels very much like JMD, not when he did Spectacular and the Harry Osborn stuff, frankly, but when JMD did Amazing, which kind of branched into the Clone Saga. And at that point, I think JMD's personal life wasn't in a great place, and I think the storytelling reflected that. And Bagley has like said in interviews, while he ended up doing great work with JMD and loved working with him, there was a time where he was kind of like, I don't know if I really want to be working with that guy, because he's kind of depressing. and it's kind of funny that Bagley is back. I mean, it's not, I don't know if you want to call it full time, but back on this book in a way that he hasn't been in decades, and he's doing the same kind of stuff he did with JMD, and it's got to kind of be like, oh, okay, like, but yeah, like, it's dour and it's kind of depressing, and there's no hope spot. I think I mentioned that phrase a while ago, many years ago, where that becomes a frustration. It's like, at some point, it's superhero comics, it's a fantasy, we're all living the fantasy, we need hope, and there is no hope in this book right now. There's no hope on the horizon. There's no reason to feel optimistic about what's going on with these characters, and that's kind of a sad state of affairs in superhero comics. So,
well, especially considering the world that we're in right now, although you can't blame Spencer for that. Well, because
no.
I blame Nick Lowe for that, for putting 2 annuals in 1 year. So like,
there you go.
That's what happened in 2020. I'm going to stick with that.
I mean, they're not under any obligation to tell us happy stories because the world is a dumpster fire right now. But like I said, like, I do feel there is an element of storytelling of this medium where you have to show where the hope is, even if the hope is well out on the horizon, or is going to take all kinds of yeoman's work to get there. I feel like you need to at least show where the hope might come. And like we got that the whole time during Superior. We knew as bad as the situation that Peter was in Superior, he was dead. We had a hope spot. Which just reminded me, could the skeleton be Doc Ock? we never got the resolution on the Doc Ock skeleton, did we?
I feel like we did, but I'm always forgetting what it was.
Yeah, okay, anyway. Why don't we take it home, Dan?
All right. Take it home, Mark.
Alas, it is that time for all good things to come to an end. So we want to say thank you to you, the listeners and viewers, for tuning in to this episode of The Amazing Spider Talk.
This episode was edited by Rick Coast with production support from Andy Myers. Our artwork comes handcrafted by artists Ron Friends, Sal Buscema, and Ray Sumser. And our theme songs were produced by Rylan Bojack, Tony Thaxton, and Spider Madge. This episode was originally released on Patreon as a live stream hangout with us back when the comic was first released. So if you'd like to help support our show's continued existence and these reviews while joining us on the live stream, why not head on over to our Patreon and sign up? So, Mark, until we figured out whose body it is that you've had rotting in your basement for all these years, I mean, come on, just who is that? What is our motto?
I mean, are you saying, is it like Flash Thompson? I mean,
it's your basement, Mark. So you would know better than I do. I mean, you've been broadcasting for a while now, but that stench, covering it up with your drunken behavior with all the beer you drink. But
oh my goodness,
I'm a little concerned. Yeah. Yeah, I can see the smell lines. Yeah.
I'm like Pigpen from Charlie Brown. Anyway, our motto, of course, Dan, is with great podcasts, there must also come the amazing Spider Talk.
Two men who know the angles, uncover and untangle all the questions and the webs left out to tangle. In 1962, last Wednesday's afternoon, they'll bend your ears with reckless self-abandon. The amazing